Well, good afternoon, everybody. Wow, lucky last. Not. It's really, really, really hard to follow these splendid people. Thank you all so much, and our two absentees. It's interesting with Reiki that a lot of the time this weekend we've been talking about the spiritual aspects, and absolutely it is a spiritual practice. But I'd like to ask you guys a few questions because I'm now going to have to completely revamp anything I might have thought I was going to say because everybody else has already covered it. So, the first question I'd like to ask you is, how many of you came to Reiki because of a physical health challenge, either your own or someone you cared about? Can I see a show of hands, please? Okay. So how many of you went to Reiki because you'd heard about benefits for mental and or emotional health? Can I see a show of hands, please? Okay. So how many of you came because you'd heard about the spiritual aspects of Reiki? Interesting, isn't it? Okay. I first came to Reiki in 1997 for completely selfish reasons. I wanted to prove the doctors wrong. Now, there's nothing like a Virgo wanting to prove somebody wrong. Are there any other Virgos out there? Yeah. I'm surprised you owned up to it. So, one of the interesting things about Virgos is that they are very, very, very critical. But the funny thing is they are far more critical of themselves than they ever are of anybody else. And with Reiki, you can actually let go of all that. Isn't that nice? So I never lost my capacity for appropriate constructive criticism as, a classroom teacher, etc., after doing Reiki, because I was always interested in criticism being a way to draw out the potential of the children I was working with. But I was working with a lot of children who were badly damaged, children who were behaviourally disturbed, children who were intellectually impaired. And Reiki, interestingly enough, gave me a tool that in my classroom there were some amazing results, above and beyond what I had ever even dreamed of or hoped for before Reiki. But I want to tell you how I came to Reiki, because I think it will illustrate for you why I will then look at how we are perceived by people who don't actually do or live or practice Reiki. So, I'm a performing arts teacher as well as a Reiki teacher, and I have been performing on stages, usually rehearsed material, not improv like this, since I was 7 years old. And I hate to confess it, but that's more than 44 years experience now. And I was what was known as a triple threat. I was the kid that everybody wanted to put on Young Talent Time. Who remembers that show? Okay. So Tina Marina and I are about the same age, and she got the opportunity to be on the show and I didn't. So there you go. I was actually invited to audition for NIDA when I was 15 years old. And, normally they wait for you to actually finish high school, and normally you are not approached. So I don't know how they heard about me, by the way. I've got no idea. But I didn't do that. I was drawn to teaching and working with children and using the flair for performing arts to reach children with music and movement and storytelling and pretend games, all of those things to reach out to children. But I also worked in the performing arts field. So I auditioned for a show called Calamity Jane. And who remembers the Doris Day and Howard Keel movie? Yeah? Once I had a secret love. Yeah, that one? Okay. So I won the role of Calam. How exciting. Really exciting. So we were 3 days out from opening night, and it was a Canberra production, and we had our local TV station wanted to come along and film a promotional segment so they could pop it up on the news. You know, the kind of thing you see, now this Friday night at such and such, we've got the local production of XYZ opening. So that kind of a thing. And the whole idea was they'd come and film a segment of me singing and dancing Windy City with some other cast members, and then they were going to do the interview with myself and the director afterwards. So I'm in the middle of my just came in from the Windy City, you know, I'm doing all of that, and there's a heel click in there like this. Unbeknownst to me, somebody had thought it was a good idea to paint the stage a couple of hours before we were filming. My foot went straight out from underneath me. Now remember what direction I was travelling in. And I came crashing down with the entire weight of my torso on the inside of my ankle. The snapping sound was so loud you can hear it in the footage. Channel 9 thought it would be a nice souvenir for me to have. Not. Now, fortunately for me, we had a physiotherapist in the cast, and she immobilised me, got me sorted. The camera crew kept filming, you know, this is great. I've never felt anything as painful before or since. Even childbirth wasn't as bad. But of course I had Reiki during childbirth, and that's another story. So I was taken to Calvary Hospital in Canberra, which is where the AIS send all their sports students for their checkups and everything else. And I was lucky enough to have the AIS sports doctor on duty when I was brought in. So he does the poking and the prodding and the physical exam, and I'm nearly through the ceiling. And then he sends me off for x-rays, and this whole time he's, you know, got the semi-grim, I think it's bad news, but I don't want to tell you face on. And I'm sitting there thinking, we open in 3 days. Oh. Fortunately, I had an understudy. And I'd actually said to the director, whenever he had us in rehearsing the leads, I said, I really want Erica to do every scene as well. And I'm so relieved I did, because guess what? I was told after my scan and everything, I'm terribly sorry, Sue. You have completely snapped through every single ligament on the outside of your left ankle. Now, that kind of injury, I see it quite a bit in the sporting area, generally doesn't heal completely, and it takes a very long time, if it ever heals properly at all. And not only do I not think you will be opening your show this weekend, I don't think you'll ever dance again. Okay, well, what am I going to do about that? I went to opening night, crutches, plaster. I thought, okay, I've got to prove them wrong. So he advised, to get the best results, that I did, there was a daily physio routine. The idea was I would do that twice a day. I would go to outpatients physiotherapy, fortunately with the physiotherapist who'd been in the cast, and that would give me the best possible outcome. So I thought, okay, good. I'm going to be really diligent and dedicated and dutiful. I'm going to do exactly what I'm told, and I'm going to prove him wrong as far as his prognosis goes. So There I am being diligent and dutiful and doing my home program. After 3 months, I've got my strength back. I've got my flexibility back. But there is clearly still underlying nerve damage because I never got rid of the pain. Never. So at the end of 3 months, I was told, we can't really do anything more for you. We're absolutely blown away by the progress. You know, we saw in your first 3 weeks what we would normally see in 3 months, and we've seen in the 3 months what we would normally see in 6 to 12 months. So you've made amazing progress, but we now can't do anything more for you. You just need to persevere with the home program and hope that the nerves repair themselves. That didn't sound very good. What could I do? I was talking to a friend of mine who had done that Reiki stuff. And in fact, it was probably the one area of our lives that we didn't discuss, because she'd raised it with me once. And I'd studied Japanese for 6 years in high school. I knew that Reiki could mean, you know, flaky spook stuff. And if you ask Inamoto Sensei, he will confirm that there is that connotation. There is that way to interpret the kanji, which are the characters that make up Reiki. So I was, please don't talk to me about anything alternative. I just don't want to know. There's got to be something in medical science coming up, some kind of experimental drug, I don't know, something. Anyway, I was informed by my friend, and I say informed, meaning told quite bluntly, the following. So, I think the reason why you made such rapid progress was because I was sending you absent healing every night for the first 3 weeks, and weekly after that until 3 months. Guess what that coincided with? Exactly the periods of time where they were saying the rapid progress had been achieved. And there I was thinking it was all the stuff I'd done. And she said, but the fact is, I now have other people who are needier than you on my list of people that I want to send absent healing to. And there is now, from my teachers' organisation, a class coming up in Canberra. What have you got to lose? You've tried everything else. What have you got to lose? Well, nothing, I suppose, except a fairly substantial fee and the fact that it was a class that went for the Friday night and the all-day Saturday and the all-day Sunday, and that was a lot of time out of a weekend. And, you know, did I really want to be sitting in a room full of people where, frankly, I just didn't think I'd fit in? Or you get the picture, right? But then I thought, I've never known this person to dissemble, to exaggerate. So if she said Reiki's made an enormous difference in her life, then if I believe her when she says she saw a red car smash into a blue car, why can't I believe her that just maybe there's something in this new age weird stuff? So I showed up at my seminar on the Friday afternoon, and I just went up to the rego desk. I kind of just put down my money. I, went and sat in the very back seat, as far back as I could get. And there I was, willing to be open and receptive, sitting in my chair like this. Interestingly enough, my teacher said to me that all she expected from the students that weekend was to be there and to have the attunements and to make sure we attended for the whole thing. And after that, really, it was up to us. Okay. So it was a largish class, so they handed a microphone around so that we could all introduce ourselves. And the microphone got to me. Well, the science background came out. Would you mind letting me know, please, what double-blind studies have been done? If this is an energy, it therefore should be able to be measured. What frequency are we talking about here? You get it. So many years later, my teacher said to me, and I quote, "You were one of my most difficult students." I can see why. But anyway, by the end of the weekend, even though I wasn't feeling anything in my hands, I had experienced other things going on, and even though I never ever got my hands on my ankle, by the Sunday night, when I went home, no pain. Oh, okay. Maybe Reiki's good as a pain management tool. Maybe it's one of those mind over matter things, and but I don't really care, because this is the first time in 5 months where I'm not feeling pain. And to give you an idea about how debilitating it was over that whole time, if I rolled over in bed at night and hooked my toe in the sheet, I woke up in agony with tears pouring down my face. If I was walking on ground that was even slightly uneven, I was in intense pain. If I wore shoes that were not completely flat, like, Nike joggers or something like that, I was in intense pain. I couldn't walk upstairs normally. I'd have to lead with the good leg and then work like Jake the Peg with the other one. I didn't want to take painkillers because I know that when you take them over a long period of time, there's the potential for them to become addictive, and they're not so good to the liver. So I kind of just, I guess, was a bit of a martyr. I copped it on the chin and kept doing my thing, which at that time was a corporate trainer in the Commonwealth Public Service. So can you imagine me showing up to teach the Commissioner for Superannuation how to use Windows, wearing the beautiful tailored, corporate suit that we wore in the 1990s with joggers? Fortunately, she was very understanding. So I didn't feel terribly professional in anything I was doing then, because I was always wearing joggers, which certainly didn't match the rest of what I was wearing. Unlike today, I can be a bit more relaxed. So Reiki, having got rid of the pain in that 2.5 days, blew me away. Now, I didn't pretend to understand it, and like I said, I thought maybe it was just a mental thing that had occurred. Maybe it was a mental shift rather than something else. But I was walking along one day with my husband, and we were looking at a house that had had one of those dreadful extensions done, where they kind of half chop the roof out and then stick something else on top, and it doesn't, stylistically, it just doesn't match the original building. And I was really quite puzzled, and I'm looking at this, when I stepped off the curb, slipped, landed on my ankle in exactly the same way that I'd originally injured it, and I just got up and I kept walking. And I left my husband back there. What's wrong? Sue, wasn't that the ankle? Oh my God! The underlying issue, whatever that was, had obviously been really healed. Not pain management, not pain masking, but genuine physical healing. Wow, it was pretty impressive. And because my teacher had said, You've come to the class, you've invested your time and your money and your own energy in terms of being here. The best any of us can get out of this is to make sure we practice it daily. So, diligent Virgo student that I was, I had been practicing Reiki daily and adding the ankle as an extra, even though I wasn't experiencing pain with it anymore. So when I'd had the proof, when I felt that the whole thing had actually been resolved, I started going back to exercise classes and dancing and things. And so 3 weeks after I had that second fall, there was an audition for a chorus line. Does anybody know the show A Chorus Line? Yeah. So you know it's a dancer's show. Bugger the triple threat thing, you actually, first and foremost for that, you have to dance because most of the show is dancing. So the auditions, as you can imagine, were focused predominantly on dancing. It was a 3-hour dance audition, 3 hours non-stop, ballet, tap, contemporary. Then straight after that, 2 hours auditioning for the reading and dramatic aspects and the singing. And I got a leading role. Whoa! If that wasn't enough, without even thinking, purely because I had been doing daily practice, and I never expected to get any other outcome. Remember, I only went because I wanted to prove the doctors wrong about my ankle. A lot of the physical health issues that I had simply been putting up with over the years because I didn't think anything could be done about them, resolved. So the first thing I noticed was we get to hay fever season. And I would normally suffer from all sorts of, even my spelling's going bad now, all sorts of dreadful things. I would get asthma, I would get eczema, I would get sinusitis and chronic rhinitis, and I would be taking as many antihistamines as I could pop legitimately. You know, it says only take X number every few hours and so on. And then I would, even in spite of that, be blowing my nose and go through a whole box of 200 tissues and things like that. So we get to the first hay fever season, and I'm anticipating all of these things, and nothing happens. No asthma, no eczema, no hay fever. Goodness, I wasn't expecting that. So I'd had another health challenge in terms of my gut, and I had developed all the symptoms of IBS as a teenager, which of course they didn't call it that then. They didn't have a nice little convenient label for it, but I used to suffer really incredibly bad cramping. Griping in the bowel is how the 14th century monks used to term it in Britain. Gripings in the bowel. Sounds great, doesn't it? That would, you know, and I would fluctuate every couple of days. I'm constipated, I got the runs. I'm constipated, I got the runs. You know, there was never a happy medium. That IBS disappeared. I didn't even think about it. But after doing Reiki, all the IBS symptoms disappeared. So I better add that to my little shopping list of things, hadn't I? So another health challenge from a long time before Reiki was, and here I am in another show, when I was in rehearsal for Camelot, we were just a few weeks out from opening. I was at work one day and I hemorrhaged, and it was a gynecological hemorrhage, so you guys don't need to know any more detail than that because it's just unpleasant, right? We don't need to know about secret women's business. But the resulting investigations showed that I had CIN3 of the cervix, and I was only in my 20s. And I hadn't done or followed the behaviour patterns that were normally expected for women who become susceptible to that at a young age. So it just didn't fit as far as my gynecologist was concerned. So then the gyno said, well, I'd really like to operate straight away because you had no prior symptoms. You know, normally there'll be a bit of breakthrough bleeding or something. You had none of that. So I'm concerned this might be aggressive. And I said, ugh. Hated the idea of surgery. I was so frightened of being under anaesthetic and maybe not waking up. It was almost, would freeze me. Then they could have operated anyway because I wouldn't have moved. But he said, I really would like to do this sooner rather than later. And I said, but I'm sorry, I don't have an understudy. And he said, when does your show go on? And I said, well, it actually opens next weekend and it goes for 3 weekends. So the Monday straight after the show's finished, I promise you I can front up. I see people nodding because they're the delaying tactics and things. People, I think, can understand the delaying tactics. Anyway, I go in for surgery and they obviously do pathology tests and they check the uterus as well. That was fine, but the cervix was compromised to the extent that it had progressed to CIN4, which is not good. Normally they would do a hysterectomy then anyway because chances are it's going to move to where you don't want it. But because I hadn't had kids, they thought, well, we'll just monitor. The problem was I was one of those unfortunate cases where a lot of scar tissue developed. Lots. And I was basically informed, well, you probably won't fall pregnant because there's so much scar tissue, things won't be able to meet where they need to. If you did happen to fall pregnant, which, as we said, we don't think would happen easily, but if you did happen to fall pregnant, you'd probably miscarry before you realised it because your cervix won't be able to do its job properly. If you did happen to work out you were pregnant before that happened, we could stitch you up. And then if you did happen to get all the way through the pregnancy, you'd probably have to have a Caesar. Lucky I was with a man who didn't want children was my reaction to that, because I just thought, I really think kids are going to be out. So it was many, many years later that I did Reiki. Now, part of the monitoring process that my doctors were insistent about was an annual visual inspection, for want of a better term. So 6 months after I'd completed Reiki 1, I was due for my checkup, and I used to call it my present, not my birthday present, but my annual present to myself to ensure that that area was still healthy and that I was still good and cancer-free and all of those things. That was the only positive spin I could put on it to actually make me go and do this each year. So I'm lying there, you ladies will know what I mean, and I'm looking at my doctor's face and he's chatting away, and then suddenly the face just, and I'm thinking, uh-oh. His face, this doesn't look good. I think there must be something wrong. I said, Craig, what is it? He said, Sue, I don't know what you've been doing, but if I didn't know better, I would swear that what I'm looking at is a completely normal, healthy cervix. And that's not supposed to happen. But given that you're in your late 30s, if you want to go and have kids, you better go and do it now. So that was an amazing outcome. So I had scar tissue that disappeared. So then I go home to my husband and I say, well, darling, you know how we weren't going to have any children? Yeah. Looks like we can now if we want to. Oh, okay. I'll have to think about that. Well, within 2 months of deciding, well, yes, maybe it might be nice to have a child, but I'm 39, right? 39 by this stage. I'm pregnant, like that. Just before my 30th 40th birthday, I had an absolutely beautiful baby son that I never anticipated holding in my arms at all. I just always thought I'd be an auntie to my nieces and nephews, and that would be cool, that would be enough. And he's a completely normal, wonderful boy of 11 years old. 2 years later, my husband said to me, Sue, he remembered something one of my teachers had said. Do you think maybe, Connor's turned out okay. Do you think maybe we could have another one? And I went, what? He said, well, like a sibling. Wouldn't that be nice? Roger, it's October. Next birthday in August, I'm 42. I tell you what, if it doesn't happen before the end of the calendar year, it's not happening. Connor slept in one morning and, the rest is history. So 2 children that I wasn't supposed to have, and extremely healthy. And the other thing was I Reiki'd myself through the pregnancy every single day. What do they tell you about older women? Higher risk for Down syndrome. Higher risk for gestational diabetes. Higher risk for edema. Higher risk for toxemia. My pregnancy went through like the textbook 25-year-olds. And I have to say, I'm positive it was Reiki that helped with that. So I am extremely grateful to Reiki for all the blessings that it bestows in terms of physical health, which is something we've skirted a little bit this weekend. So the physical health side of it is extraordinary. But if that's extraordinary, what about all the other stuff? We know the picture is much, much, much bigger than the physical health side. Yeah? Everyone agree with that? Yeah. So what did I learn? Well, interestingly enough, I had a shopping list of things I thought I'd cover today. And I thought I'd talk about, helps if you pull it off the right end, I thought I'd talk about the precepts, the precepts or the ideals and so on. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Franz. Thank you. Yeah, that's been covered. Okay, well, maybe I can talk about meditation. That's and bringing oneself into a calm and centered place, and how good is that? Oh, thanks, Franz. Thanks, Kathleen. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, great. That's another one down. You get the idea. So what happened for me over the course of the weekend was I came to the conclusion that I really was genuinely going to have to not ignore completely what I would cover, but monitor things a bit and make some adjustments and just throw the script away. So that's what I've done. So what I would like to do then is tackle something that perhaps we've only, it's been alluded to, it's been mentioned, and it's the idea of the professional treatment practitioner. Do you mind if I ask how many of you here perform treatments on people? Yep, excellent, thank you. So hopefully then, if I look at that aspect of it, that will be of interest to you. I was so excited by what had happened for me. I immediately thought, why aren't there lots of practitioners out there offering lots of Reiki to people? Now remember, this is 1998 by this stage. And there just weren't many. And I thought, well, Reiki's been such a blessing and benefit for me. I'd really like to offer treatments professionally. So because of the other areas that I'd worked in, I knew a bit about appropriate hygiene, and I'd done small business, so I knew what those kinds of aspects were that I needed to cover, and therefore I just needed my premises and my table, and I got myself all sorted. And I had a dentist friend of mine who was actually really interested in what I was doing, and he referred one of his clients to me to receive treatment because this gentleman had horrendous insomnia, and it didn't matter how many sleeping pills he popped, he couldn't sleep. So he came along and he said, well, I'm only here because Peter said I should be here. And I said, well, that's all right, hop up on the table, we'll give it a try, and I will just trust that Reiki will flow. Yeah, okay. So he takes his belt and his shoes off and he hops up on the table, and I'm calm, centered, start working. I'm not feeling anything. Oh, well, that's interesting because my hands to me feel as though they're quite warm. And then the feeling waned, so for me that was a clue and a cue to move to another position, so I move into another position. Still not feeling anything. Well, never mind. So I finish that, and I finish a few other positions while he's face up, and then I ask him to turn over. Let's turn you over, and I'll actually start working down your back. Get my hands on his back, and in less than 20 seconds, so the entire last bit of the treatment, he is snoring away through the face hole. I'm internally having this nice little giggle, because how nice is it that the reason why he came, he's actually getting a result. And so we finish up, and I get to the end, and the end for me was when the energy had waned, so my hands were saying, okay, he doesn't actually need any more right now. So I just stepped away and I sat down and I watched him. And then I could see he told me he needed to be out by X because he was going somewhere. So then I very gently woke him up and got him sorted, and he put his shoes on and his belt, and he took his wallet out, and he very begrudgingly handed over the fee, and he said, I still didn't feel anything. That was my first experience as a professional practitioner. So I am extraordinarily passionate about Reiki's capacity to heal on all levels. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I find when I'm available for treatments and people come, that they come to me for one thing and they get something entirely unexpected. Can I see a show of hands? So what I often find is somebody will come and the comment will be, like one woman who I used to work with periodically in Canberra. The first time she came to me, she came and she said, oh, my sister thought that because I get very uncomfortable and feel quite a bit of pain with massage, that maybe I could try a Reiki treatment for relaxation. And I said, okay, yep, for some people they are a bit sensitive to massage. I'm more than happy to give you a treatment, and most people do report that they feel quite relaxed during and afterwards. So yeah, let's give it a try. But we'll also be open to see if anything else might happen. So she's on the table, and suddenly there are just tears. Tears, tears, tears. And she was embarrassed. And I said, don't be. It's actually okay. It's safe for you to cry here if you want to cry. So the tears came, the tears went, and she sat up and she said, my mother died a month ago and I couldn't cry. And that, I ended up after that with, I think it was 10 people in a row who all came to me, said they were wanting Reiki for something else, and it was grief that was released. So I never have expectation when I do treatments, and I always explain to my clients that it's fine for them to come hoping for an outcome, but the outcome they get might not be what they hoped for. And if they're okay with that, we proceed. And one of the things that I really liked that Inamoto Sensei said earlier today was about put your hands on, surrender, let it happen. So for me, performing treatments is about trusting and getting out of our own way, getting out of our heads, putting ego aside, and just let's see what happens. However, what do people who look in from the outside think of us who do hands-on or near Reiki practice treatments? I'll get on to Q&A quickly after this. So often we are looked at and perceived as that there are like two streams in Reiki, that there's the personal practice and they're the people that go off with the fairies and do meditation and are all new agey and blah, blah, blah. And then you've got the ones that they have a professional practice area and they have a proper table and they have their business registration name and they've got their insurance and blah, blah, blah. It's this side where I see the future of Reiki, in that people's attitudes to that are really changing. But in line with that, the consumer has expectations about the training the practitioners have received. And that's why it's really interesting and exciting that the Certificate 4s that John talked about and the course that I was asked to create with the Council of Australian Reiki Organisations is available. Because if you're a sole practitioner and you want some additional training just to make sure that your basic small business stuff is there and the basic occ health and safety and what's appropriate for professional practice is there, that's where that course slots in. And if you want to work in a hospital or a hospice or be employed by somebody else, that's where your Cert 4 sits. And now you've got those options. And they weren't available when I started out. So we're all very fortunate. Thank you.